This is Hollisa Alewine. Welcome back to our study in the resurrection, 50,000 degrees and cloudy. In our last program, we looked at some key words. These are words we would say are the words in the hood. The words we're looking for in context together. Now, you won't always see all of them together in the same place at the same time, but you might see different combinations of them, like we saw in the Psalm last week. So let's just review those key words, because we never want to forget them. We want to hold on to these words from now until the end of the book, because they won't stop being important. They're constant. So, of course, the key word, resurrection. We want to listen for words that, if they don't explicitly say resurrection, they would hint to it. Shouting, blowing a shofar or blowing a trumpet, a beginning of the year, royalty and the throne of God, ruling over the nations, clouds, white garments, judgment, repentance, and remembrance. That cluster of words, you will start to see two or more of them together as we start to go through these texts. That's a little flag that you might be reading about the resurrection. All right, so we paired it up with just this brief introduction to the Feast of Trumpets. Again, it goes back to Numbers chapter 10. That's our context, where it says, "In the day of your gladness and in your appointed feasts, on the first days of your months, you shall blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings, your olah offerings, your going up offerings, over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, your completion offerings, perfection offerings, and they shall be as a reminder of you before your God. I am the Lord your God." So now we want to slide on down again and look where it begins speaking to us about the movement of the camp of Israel. And if we think of the camp of Israel, it really is what we hope to gather to at some future time. We talk sometimes about the greater Exodus. Well, the pattern is the Exodus from Egypt, where basically all the Israelites are being taken out of one nation. Well, at the greater Exodus, our expectation is we would be gathered out from all nations, every nation, tribe, and tongue. There would be a gathering. But we look back to that original Exodus for the pattern. Their resurrection from Egypt, or if we look at Egypt as Mitzrayim, which is the Hebrew word, it would basically mean from tribulations. So Israel was taken from tribulations. At the greater Exodus, we will be taken from tribulations. So let's look at the movement. It says, in the second year, in the second month, on the 20th of the month, the cloud was lifted. All right, there's our key. There's the cloud, and it's going up from over the tabernacle of testimony. And the sons of Israel set out on their journeys from the wilderness of Sinai. So now we see Israel moving. There's movement. Then the cloud settled down in the wilderness of Paran. Okay, there's some of our key words again, the cloud, and it's descending. So we have an ascending and we have a descending of the cloud, which we have context now because we read the message to the Thessalonians, where he talks about the Lord himself will descend with a shout, the voice of the archangel, the trump of God. The dead in Christ will what? Ascend. They will rise first. So being caught up together in the cloud, descending, ascending, those are our words in the hood. And it's taking us back to this wilderness journey in the cloud. It says, so they moved out for the first time, according to the commandment of the Lord through Moses. Okay, so here's the question. Did they move according to the movement of the cloud, or did they move according to the commandment of the Lord through Moses? Which one? Yes, both. They moved according to the cloud. When the cloud moved, they moved. When the cloud stopped, they stopped. But it also says, according to the commandment of the Lord through Moshe. So there is something about that cloud that also represents the commandment of the Lord through Moshe, the Word of God. They're moving according to the Word of God. But that clue, again, is movement in the cloud. And this is where it helps to go back to the Jewish tradition. And it's not just a tradition. They're actually combing the Torah with a fine-tooth comb to try to find out more clues. Not to just accept, well, there was just one kind of cloud in the wilderness. There was more than one aspect to the clouds in the wilderness. And each of those clouds can teach us something about the gathering into the cloud. So the given is there's a pillar of cloud by day and then pillar of fire by night. It's transformative. That representation there is of heaven, because heaven is Shemayim. And you can hear two words blended, Esh, which is fire, and Mayim, which is water. So this cloud that came down, this pillar of cloud, had both fire and water. So they have a little bit of heaven right there in the wilderness with them, whether it's day or whether it's night. But that's not the only cloud. The rabbis teach that when Israel camped, remember they went from Ramses to Sukkot. They camped at Sukkot. That's going to be their first stop. They say at Sukkot, and obviously the name would scream it too, because a sukkah is a covered temporary shelter. They went into Sukkot of glory, is kind of the nickname of it. They also call it Tabernacles of glory. So if we're thinking about the greater Exodus, we go back to the original Exodus. And the pattern is when you come out of the tribulations, then you enter into clouds of glory or tabernacles, Sukkot of glory. And that's how you're going to travel. You're going to travel in the clouds. And they say it's there that the Holy One covers the entire nation with this habitation of a cloud. And they say it was this supernatural cloud. And remember, we're not just talking about the pillar of cloud now. We're talking about Sukkot of glory, the clouds of glory that the people lived in. That as long as they were being obedient, they weren't complaining, they weren't rebelling and doing all the other stuff they did, that the cloud would protect them from the serpents and the scorpions beneath their feet. It would protect them from enemies on every side. Because remember Amalek, it got the stragglers at the rear. They say these were people who were basically ejected. Their faith was very weak. They were acting out. And the cloud basically just spit them out the rear. And that made them susceptible to Amalek, to fall upon them. Not because they were just physically weak, but because they were spiritually weak. They didn't have faith. And so assuming that you were faithful and you're walking with the cloud, it's going to be a shield for you on your right hand and your left from your enemies. It's going to be your rear guard. And of course, the pillar of cloud is going before you. But they said it also provided protection for them from the heat by day, because the sun is very intense down in the Arava desert, down in the Tzin desert. It's incredibly hot. And so you really couldn't move by the heat of day. You would need to either move at night, in the morning hours, in the evening hours, and then just basically try to find some shade during the heat of the day. They said with these clouds, they could actually move, and basically it was like an umbrella to protect them. The passage they're looking at here is Numbers 10, 33 through 34. And you see how many things are clustered up in Numbers 10 and 11? That's why we say, look at the words in the hood. Look at the things that are adjacent to one another on the real estate. It says, thus they set out from the mount of the Lord 3 days' journey. Okay, there's our number 3. That's again, it's hinting to resurrection. With the ark of the covenant of the Lord journeying in front of them for the 3 days to seek out a, this is important, resting place for them. Right? The clouds of glory, when they rest, that means the journey stops at this moment. You've reached, at least for them, a point in the destination. But when we're looking at the greater Exodus, reaching that resting place is basically going back into the garden, into that resting place. Because if you'll remember in the garden, if we go back to Genesis 1, there's the creation of 6 days, but then on the 7th day it's Shabbat. And it's called not just holy, but it's very good. All right, it's a Yom Tov, a very good day. Why? Because it's a resting place. All the preparation you've done on the previous 6 days, now you rest in it. The journey's over today. You take a break. And so an eternal resting place obviously is being restored back to the garden, to that crowning achievement of Shabbat, mankind resting on Shabbat with Adonai in full fellowship. And it says the cloud of the Lord was over them by day when they set out from the camp. And this is where, again, in the Jewish context, they're saying, okay, this is a cloud distinct from the pillar of cloud which went before them. Or in some cases, like if the Egyptians were chasing them, the pillar might move and get between them and their enemies. But in this case, it's the cloud of the Lord was over them by day when they set out from the camp. Now, how would they know the cloud of the Lord was over them? Were they guessing? There might be a cloud up there. We don't see it, but there could be. No, they would know that there was a cloud up there because it's going to be over them when they set out from the camp. So there again, when you're caught up together in the cloud to meet the Lord in the air, how far up do you think that cloud actually is? Again, we're using these patterns to help establish what Paul is writing and from what context he's writing. So out here in this supernatural place of the wilderness journey where the cloud is over the top of them as they set out on the journey, as they're dwelling in clouds of glory and Sukkot, you can basically see the clouds everywhere. They're in Sukkot, they're in clouds, they're under clouds, and then there's a cloud going before them. So there are clouds everywhere. Not only that, once the tabernacle is constructed, you are going to have clouds of incense, which represents prayers. So the clouds of the people, it represents the prayers of the people. The clouds of the people are now going to be able to mingle with this cloud that's going to be over the ark, from where the voice comes from, which is, it's a beautiful unity picture that you see there. But the Israelites, they're out here in the wilderness. The manna's going to fall every morning. Remember, Moses threw a piece of wood, a tree, into the bitter water. They had water. In another case, they call water out of the rock. And this rock follows them around in the wilderness. So they have food and they have water. They've come out of Egypt. They've come out of the tribulations. So they're eating angel food, right? It's the food of angels. They're actually eating the word. They don't understand what they're eating because remember, it's spiritually discerned. What you see from a natural viewpoint shouldn't inhibit your spiritual vision at the very same time. So Yeshua as the Word. They're eating this every morning and really not discerning it. But they have supernatural food and they have supernatural water. Supernaturally, their clothes aren't wearing out. Supernaturally, their sandals aren't wearing out. Their feet aren't swelling, which, trust me, they do when you're taking a little hike in the Tzin Desert. So they're in a semi-supernatural state here, which is a glimpse into what life in the lower garden might be like. And we know they're still living very strictly in this physical level because of the lack of faith. Nevertheless, out of mercy, they are experiencing this bread from the garden. Right? Remember, the manna, it said, had the appearance of bdellium. Bdellium in Hebrew is bdolach. And so bdolach, it's like crystal. It's like the rainbow where the white light goes through and then it gets refracted into the colors of the rainbow. And it says that the manna survived, that it fell around the camp, just like the rivers of Eden. It's circling the camp. And it has the appearance of crystal. Right? So remember where we read about the crystal sea coming from the throne? They get up in the morning, they're in clouds of glory, they look out, they see a crystal sea of manna. We're getting all kinds of garden pictures right here. They get the water, and remember the rivers, they gave drink to the garden. So they've come out of tribulation, out of Egypt, to enjoy this supernatural experience of food, water, and travel, where their travel is accompanied, or actually surrounded by, a cloud. And so within that cloud, what do? They construct a tabernacle to invite that divine presence to dwell among them. And that's what Paul is saying, being gathered into the cloud is simultaneously with being with the Lord forever. And that was the idea of the tabernacle. Let's erect this tabernacle in the cloud so that his presence will be with us forever. Here's what it says of the tabernacle. And the reference on this is going to be Exodus 29, 43, and 46, just for sake of brevity. But it says, there I will meet. What did Paul say? We will meet him. There I will meet with the children of Israel, and the tabernacle shall be sanctified by my glory. There's that sanctification. That's exactly what he did with the Sabbath day, the day of rest at the creation in Genesis 1. So he says, this tabernacle shall be sanctified, be made holy, kadosh, set apart by my glory. Remember, one of the nicknames of Sukkot of glory is clouds of glory. Where are they getting the glory? They're getting it right here in the cloud. He says, and they shall know that I am the Lord their God, that brought them forth out of the land of Egypt, that I may dwell among them. I am the Lord their God. That's a second clue, that I may dwell among them. What did Paul say? So shall we ever be with the Lord. What does he say in the Torah? That I may dwell among them. So the people are in the cloud. Israel is in the cloud. He meets with us in the cloud, represented by the tabernacle, and he dwells among us in the cloud. So the tabernacle is going to be this focal point of worship to try to bring the nation into unity. And if the nation could come into unity in worship, remember our context from Psalm 47 where you can see that's the praise, the praise, the praise, the praise. If they can come into unity and praise and worship him, then it's the divine presence is going to be able to dwell with them. And that's what Paul said, so shall we ever be with the Lord. So let's look at something that John wrote in Revelation 7:14 through 17. He said, "These are the ones who come out of the great tribulation." Where did Israel just come from? They had just come from great tribulations, from Mitzrayim, Egypt. "And they have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. For this reason they are before the throne of God." Okay, the throne of God, remember, is a Feast of Trumpets theme. "And they serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will spread his tabernacle over them." This is describing what happened in the wilderness, where he's using the clouds as an extension of his presence to dwell among the people. "They will hunger no longer." Why? Well, in the wilderness they get manna, they get food from heaven. And when you're in heaven, you get food from heaven. "Nor thirst anymore." Why? Because of the rock, because of Yeshua. Remember, those rivers give drink to the whole garden. He says, "Nor will the sun beat down on them." Remember what we just read? The cloud was over them by day, so they could do whatever they needed to do. They could work, they could journey, they could rest, whatever they needed to do, the cloud protected them from the heat. And that's what it says, "Nor will the sun beat down on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb in the center of the throne will be their shepherd." Moses was a shepherd. What was he? He was a prophecy of Yeshua, the Lamb. "And will guide them to the springs of the water of life." Remember when Moses has to throw the tree into the spring to make it sweet? "And God will wipe every tear from their eyes." Well, every year when we celebrate Pesach, we have, remember the little salt water that we dip the greens in? Why? Because it reminds us of the salty tears from Egypt, from when we came out of the tribulations. And he says, God will wipe every tear from their eyes. Every remembrance of Egypt, he is going to remove that from us at the resurrection. So, at the Feast of Tabernacles, it depends on your English translation. It might say Feast of Tabernacles. It might say Feast of Booths. But we know it's Sukkot in Hebrew. And so that's the thing to remember from this chapter. That at the resurrection, we are going to be gathered into Sukkot of glory, or clouds of glory. That's the destination of Israel at the resurrection. In the same way they came out of Israel at Passover, they're going to come out at the Feast of Trumpets. Two different types of resurrection. But once we come out, it's there, just like Israel in the wilderness. We are going to dwell in that presence of the divine glory with Yeshua forever. That's the promise. So that's the simple explanation of the cloud. But just like one of those horrible infomercials on TV, it's like, oh, but there's more. Because there's more Torah. There's more to learn from in the Torah. So in the chapter Going Up or Settling Down, we want to take a closer look again at this cloud's movement. When it would lift, when it would actually settle down, because remember, there's different aspects of this cloud. There's a pillar of cloud. There's a cloud that's over them. There's a cloud that they are in. It's kind of challenging to try to figure out from the Torah all the different aspects of the cloud itself. But I think from the last chapter, just establishing the cloud as that baseline for understanding the resurrection. You can see the seeds of Jewish thought there. You can see where they're getting so many of these themes. We can also tie it into the angel of the presence. And as we look at the angel of the presence in the pillar of cloud, he has some unique attributes. And one of those unique attributes was he actually had the power to not forgive sin. He says, don't rebel against him. My name is in him. Yod-He, Vav-He is in this messenger, in this angel. And if you rebel against him, it's just the same as if you rebelled against the Holy One. And so with this ability, if he has the power to not forgive sin, it follows that probably he does have the power to forgive it. Because remember, the divine name is in him. And that's how Yeshua tended to get in trouble. It wasn't so much for healing people, even though he would get into fine points of the Torah with the Sadducees concerning what was permissible to do on Shabbat in terms of healing. But Yeshua got in trouble for forgiving sin. That was the biggie that really set them off. And they either marveled that Adonai had given such power to men, or they would accuse him of blasphemy. There wasn't much middle ground right there. Why? Because Yeshua is basically telling people when he forgives sin that he's identifying himself with that angel of the presence in the cloud. So when we think of Yeshua descending in the cloud, gathering us into the cloud, then ascending into the cloud, it makes perfect sense in the context of the angel of the presence, because it really is a revelation of Yeshua to the Israelites. He's at the forefront of their movements. He's guiding them. And he dwells in the cloud. He dwells in the cloud by day. He dwells in the fire by night. He gathers the camp. He moves the camp. And that movement is signaled by the blowing of trumpets, by the way. So, more words in the hood, right? But as far as Yeshua goes, being that angel of the presence in the cloud, you can see how he has been given divine control over Israel's dwelling place, which is the cloud itself. And so that redemption from Egypt was followed by a dwelling place in the cloud. And again, according to tradition, they entered into it in that first stop after they left Egypt, called Sukkot. I want to read to you how Leviticus 23, 42 through 44 was interpreted by the ancient Jewish sages. It says, live in booths, Sukkot, 7 days. Every citizen in Israel must live in Sukkot, so that future generations will know that I made the people of Israel dwell in the shade of my cloud when I took them from the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Moses spoke about the order of the set times of the Lord, and he taught them to the Israelites. And that's from Targum Onkelos. So it's an explanation, obviously, into Aramaic, which has been turned back into English for us. But he's talking about a shade of his glory in the cloud. Now, why is that important? Well, we'll find out in the next program. But the shade is going to be, or the shade of glory, it's going to be another aspect to learn about the character of the cloud. Again, why? So we can discern this resurrection cloud as a comfort, just like Paul told people that he didn't want to remain ignorant. about the return, about the set times of the Lord. So we'll explore that in the next program.